Welcome to the Product Quest podcast. Thank you for joining us on our journey to better understand innovation and product strategy. My name is Scott Burleson, and joining me as always, my co-hosts Jan Vermouth and Jonathan Edwards. Today we welcome Dr. Sergei Ikovenko. Sergei is one of the world's leading authorities in the theory of inventive problem solving, commonly known as TRIZ or TRIZ. He has conducted over 1,500 workshops on TRIZ at a long list of companies, including P&G, GE, Hyundai, and many others, including the Chinese Patent Office, very interesting, and the Swiss Patent Office, nice. Very interesting. Jonathan and Jan are in Switzerland, by the way.
Oh, all right, great.
He's lectured all over the world at Harvard, MIT, Carnegie Mellon, Stanford. He has doctorates in mechanical engineering and environmental engineering, and just to keep it interesting, a master's degree in patent law. He's written over 100 publications and books. He's been a TEDx speaker and keynote at events such as the MIT Sloan Management Forum. Sergei, welcome to the Product Quest podcast.
Thank you.
I'm so excited, Sergei. I've been looking forward to this for so long. For our listeners, some will have heard of TRIZ, some have not. So here's what I was thinking. Maybe let's begin with just a brief, like that elevator speech, 2 minutes on what TRIZ is. Not a lot of detail. We'll get into depth later. So if somebody's listening, at least when we speak of TRIZ, they'll have some context as to what we're talking about. What's your sort of 2-minute overview of what TRIZ is?
TRIZ is, right. First of all, there is no enigma. TRIZ is just Russian acronym for Theory for Inventive Problem Solving. That's it. But this type of theory is captivating itself. So the idea was that everyone can really create engineering solutions at the level of invention. You know, it challenges general paradigm that you need to be born an inventor. You know, you can do it just because you were born smart. All other unwashed public, cannot do that. And the development of that methodology that was started back in the Soviet Union was about the fact that what about if we analyze the world patent collection, extract some smart moves that those inventors for many years had used consciously or unconsciously, and basically create a database of models of inventive solutions. And to match that, there were several ideas how to model engineering problems. So the general idea behind TRIZ was the following. I have an engineering problem to solve. I model it in some specific ways, and then match it with the database of models of inventive solutions. And I get a typical model of the inventive solutions on my hands that I actually develop into a real engineering solution. So basically, that would make everyone an inventor. So it is something that anyone can learn. Of course, when we convert model of engineering solution into real solution, it really depends on your imagination. Different people have different abilities to do that. That also can be really developed. But the idea itself was really fascinating. Because unfortunately, I will not talk much about it. The way engineers are taught in universities, when they are learning engineering, is really bad. Because what professors give us, it is how to solve standard situations with standard methods. I need to increase the strength of engineering system as a mechanical engineer. There are several ways. Make it thicker, use stronger material, pre-stress, change the shape. So number of standard ways. And that's what engineers study. And when they graduate and start working, sometimes it works, but sometimes, they use these methods, but they do not work. You make it thicker, the system becomes heavier. You make it curved, there's not enough space to put in that beam. You use a stronger material, it's very expensive, you're out of your budget. What to do? And then the engineers are on their own. Invent something smart, you're an engineer. Some people can do it, some people cannot. So TRIZ basically is an extension of any area of engineering. So when engineers try to use standard methods in their field and they do not work, so basically they model this problem. One of these models is different types of so-called contradictions, when improvement of one parameter leads to deterioration of another, right? And then a usual engineering approach, it's optimization, Six Sigma. Let us find that goal between. And in the long run, we have a product that is neither satisfying one requirement nor the other requirement. So a very mediocre product. Of course, optimization is useful. It is needed once the concept is developed. But to compromise at the conceptual stage of design just leads us to very mediocre products. And that's why engineering does not, or not that great in many cases, and companies struggle and bring to the market products that are mediocre. They don't have that much of competitive advantage.
It gives us a lot to follow up on. I want to back up a little bit, though. One of the most interesting, well, it's also interesting, but how it came to Mr. Altshuller and sort of the way he came to be. And you have the honor of, you actually learned under Altshuller himself. I wonder if you could share with us a little bit of kind of who he was, sort of his background and how he came to create this process. I don't know if create's the word, but at least develop this process.
Well, that's a 5-hour question to answer, because he has had a really fascinating life, difficult life, but he basically, he studied engineer as a Navy officer. He graduated from military college because that was the time of World War II. He was very kind of gravitating, always gravitating towards inventing. And when he graduated from that military college, he got an appointment to the Russian Navy as a patent engineer. So his responsibilities were to basically help his colleagues to identify an engineering solution that could be patented and actually help them to, file a disclosure, and with all these process. So because of his job, he, came across of many inventive solutions, and it was his job to help engineers to be more productive, generating inventions. And that's what he had, that blasphemous idea that it is possible probably to learn how to invent. And for that, with this idea in mind, he started this lifetime project, first collecting those smart moves. He called them inventive principles, and then kind of attaching them to types of problems that these inventive moves resolved. That is the contradictions, when improvement of one parameter leads to deterioration of another. And that was the very first tool that he developed. And that's how TRIZ started. Right now, there are many more tools, and they are much more powerful, really, than inventive principles. But to tell the truth, if you ever heard about this contradiction matrix, so basically you put in a parameter you want to improve, a parameter that deteriorates when you make that improvement, and it's a matrix, and the crossing of the line and the column, these two parameters, give you recommended smart moves that had been statistically very successful, in other patterns that had exactly the same contradictory couple of parameters like yours. That is why you get like a skeleton, like a model of an inventive problem around which you brainstorm. So though it is not the most powerful TRIZ tool right now, but to tell the truth, that's the best TRIZ tool for promoting TRIZ, because very often when kind of I present TRIZ, people say, give me something, take away, so that not just general phrases. And that is a great takeaway, because you really do not need to spend that much time learning how to use this contradiction matrix. Parameter you want to improve, when you apply known methods, what parameters deteriorate. You're going to stick your contradiction into the matrix, and you get inventive principles that are very general. For example, segment something into parts, segment something into parts so where parts can move relative to each other, turn it upside down, do the opposite instead of heating, cool, something like that. So these are like brainstorming pointers that are understandable for anyone. That is why running brainstorming session about these inventive principles, people can start using it. Maybe not the most effective way, but still without any lengthy studies and preparation. And that is a great attraction of the contradiction matrix.
Before we leave Mr. Altshuller, tell me about how his success as a science fiction writer, how that played into his development.
Right, because TRIZ did not yield any money. You could not really live on TRIZ in the former Soviet Union. So Altshuller was a science fiction writer, by the way, pretty famous one. I love science fiction. And well, naturally, I lived in the Soviet Union at that time, right? When I bumped, against TRIZ and attended Altshuller seminars, Altshuller, developer of TRIZ. But one of my favorite science fiction writer was someone called Genrich Altshuller, and I was really shocked to find out that it is a pen name of Altshuller.
Wow, and that was a total coincidence.
Yeah,
that's amazing. That's amazing. Wow.
Right. Yeah.
You were destined to be a student of Mr. Altshuller, which I believe means teacher. Is that right?
Right, yeah, but Altshuller was, Genrich Altshuller, he was very famous, especially among those who love science fiction. And maybe they never suspected about his TRIZ activities. They did not know him as Altshuller, right? With me, it was the opposite. First, I came across him as TRIZ father, that was also interesting because in the Soviet Union, well, it probably here also possible, just different track. If you wanted to get another degree, you can do it and the company pays for that. And because I was very interested in inventing, I had patents. And so the head of the IP department of the company where I work offered me, to get a master degree in patent law. And they give extra day off every week. I thought, wow, that's not too shabby, and actually learning something that you want. And we had a subject like methods of creativity, and there were a lot of brainstorming and usual psychological things. And there was TRIZ that really stood out. It was something very unusual. And I started looking for books on TRIZ, found Altschuller's books, started reading those books. And then I found that there would be a workshop, a long one, 2 weeks, of Altshuller. And I went there. So that was where I started sinking into this.
Well, I want to ask what he was like as an instructor, but I'll just go right. Well, first of all, I have to cover this point. One of the most he must have been just incredibly interesting, but one of the nuggets that jumps out at me is how he thought, he didn't really like the way the Soviet government was doing things, and so he thought it was a good idea to start a letter campaign to Stalin. I wonder if you could tell us about that a little bit.
Right, and actually, that is like a buzz story. The story was really slightly different because because I attended many trainings of his. I kind of followed wherever I heard he was teaching some. And sometimes there was training where we kind of stayed in the same place, almost isolated. It was like at a resort area that was not a resort. It was in the middle of Russian winter, but basically there was nothing to do, to study TRIZ, to eat and sleep. And that's why, he was together with us. So basically, of course, yes, he wrote a letter to Stalin. It was an open letter because he sent it not only to Stalin, but to, newspapers and magazines. And it was not just a letter because, what happened, it was 1947, I think. That was immediately after World War II. And the Soviet Union was in ruins. People did not have enough food, clothes, and so on. And the United States offered like an exchange to exchange, archives of German patent office that the Russian army had captured when they entered Berlin. They captured that, archives of German patent office with rejected applications, all that. And the U.S. Offered to exchange these archives for food and other goods because the country needed that. And Stalin agreed. And a group of prominent Soviet lawyers, patent lawyers, they basically opposed to that, saying that the value of these archives was much higher, sure. Right? And that basically that letter was like an addition to this kind of movement. And Altshuller, it was not opposing letter. He wrote that he was developed that a very interesting methodology, innovative methodology, was being developed in the Soviet Union that would make Soviet inventors the best in the world. It was interesting that after he sent this letter, there was a silence for almost a year. There was no response because the newspapers didn't know how the authorities would react, because they could encourage, saying it's a good initiative, or they could punish. That's why they were absolutely silent. And after that, a year after, Altshuller was arrested. He was accused. I mean, that was very ridiculous charge. That you see, one of Altschuller's very early inventions was a method to produce a substance called ethyl mercaptan. That's a substance that is added to natural gas. Very smelly one, because natural gas doesn't have any smell. Right. That is why it's very dangerous, because you cannot detect the leak. So they put this smelly substance for detection purposes. But it is it's like a weapon, because into the natural gas, they put very, very minute concentration of it. But if it is concentrated, people can just lose conscience. It is too strong. So Altshuller was accused of intentions of planting a bottle of that substance to the Red Square during the celebrations of the world of the socialist revolution. So just totally ridiculous. Of course, the real cause, it was that letter. Right. First of all, in this letter, he implied that the Soviet inventors had not been the best in the world. That was a crime, in itself. So, just to make a long story short, he was sentenced to death. At the quite, just close to the date, the capital punishment was substituted with 25 years of Gulag, and Altshuller went to concentration camps, and he stayed there like for 3 years, 3-4 years, till Stalin died. So that's why his life was far from being easy.
Right.
And that was why there was one of the reasons that basically he was a science fiction writer. He really never worked as an employee for any state organization. And again, state, because everything was state in the Soviet Union.
Right. Did he write while he was in prison? Would that contribute to his productivity, or not really?
Oh, that was another 5 hours.
5 hour.
Yeah, because when he was sent to Siberia, he refused to work. He was very inconvenient prisoner. He refused to work, of course, the management of the concentration camp didn't like it, and they wanted to get rid of it. They could not execute him because the sentence was not that, but they knew a lot of ways how to do it. They usually put people whom they did not want to have into a barrack with real criminals, murderers, thugs that, usually normal person, political people could not survive in that environment. But unexpectedly, the table turned. Altshuller had a phenomenal memory. He could basically retell thick books, novels, very close to the original text. And those thugs, those criminals, they did not work. They were in prison. They were sitting in the barrack locked. Just imagine, like a lot of people sitting there all day long locked. So, and here there was someone who could retell all these novels, Three Musketeers, Queen Margot, all that.
Wow.
Pretty close, and he was a very talented presenter. So instead of killing him, Altshuller said that he was like a Scheherazade sitting in the middle of the barrack and telling the stories. So when the management understood that they had made a mistake and wanted to extract Altshuller from the barrack, those thugs didn't want to give him away. So they had to design a special operation, how to extract Altshuller from there. So after that, they put him, the idea was, okay, forget about him, just don't pay attention. And they put him into another barrack where old intelligentsia, professors from Moscow and St. Petersburg, had been living for many years and dying gradually because they were old people. And Altshuller, he had like 2.5 years of military college. He understood that he needed more education. So he decided to create, according to his words, a university of one student. So he asked those professors to teach him, different subjects that they knew. And they were more than happy because they had been missing it for many years. They even argued among themselves who would be the next to teach. So he created that university of one student, as he called it. And that's where he actually got quite a lot of knowledge. So in the long run, when he is, by the end of his term, not the term, but he was released when Stalin died. But, he was promoted, he started working, and he was promoted. He was the chief engineer of the mine because they, worked in the mines. And he created several inventions right there.
Wow. Wasn't there this other anecdote I remember reading somewhere that he made some fake eyes or something like
this?
Right.
It happened when he was sitting, because when they arrested him, they needed to basically prove that he was the enemy of the people. And the interrogation during Stalin's time was pretty brutal. Not that they kind of physically hurt. Yes, of course, they did it too. But they had another way of torture. They didn't allow people to sleep. So all the interrogations were at nighttime, and at daytime, people are not supposed to sleep. That is why after several several days without sleep, people were ready to admit anything, So that's what they applied to Altshuller. But as Altshuller said, of course, I don't think that he thought about that at that time. But later, when he was teaching TRIZ, he said, we had a contradiction. I had to sleep and there was no way to sleep. So he used one of the inventive principles. Out of the margins of newspaper, he made pieces of paper, and he drew like circles there, like pupils, and then he just closed his eyes and was sitting and kind of glued those pieces of paper with the imitation of pupils to his eyelids, and that the guy who was together with him, in the cell, made pretended that they were talking about something. He was talking maybe, but Altshuller was sleeping, and it helped him to get 2-3 hours of sleep. It was still dangerous because there was a ward, walking along the corridor and looking in the peeping hole, and if he saw that people were sleeping, he basically walked in and didn't allow that. But on the outside, everything looked normal. That is why Altshuller managed to sleep, several hours. And actually, it helped him a lot. Of course, in the long run, they broke that secret. They changed the warden, the guard, and the previous guard was a guy. He had very heavy boots, and when he was walking along the corridor, it was easy to hear that he was approaching the door of the cell. But the new guard, the new warden, was a lady, a woman, and she had shoes on, kind of very soft, kind of felt type, soles. That's why she moved pretty, without making any noise, and she kind of
she caught him then.
Yeah.
It's just so fascinating. One of the books, and actually you recommended, and suddenly the inventor appeared. Tell us a little bit about that book and some of the stories.
That's another 5-hour story. Well, Schuller did. He did not have a full-time job for a state organization, but he was a writer. That's why he wrote articles for newspapers, for magazines, about inventions, about innovation, and things like that. And in the Soviet Union, there was a newspaper that everyone subscribed, was a subscriber to. I was, that was a when I say everyone, in due time, at some age. So that was a special newspaper for Boy Scouts, let us put it this way. Yeah. But Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, in the Soviet Union, everything was together. Not just boys, but for girls, it's like Young Pioneers. Maybe you have seen those red ties and sure. Be prepared. It is pretty similar. Mm-hmm. So a pretty good newspaper. As I said, I was a subscriber. 4 pages, a smaller format. It was kind of interesting. And Altshuller wrote articles for that newspaper. And those articles were very interesting. What he did, he took a real patent, adapted it, of course, eliminating terminology, and made a story of it that even kids could understand, because the subscribers of that newspapers are like 12, 14-year-old kids, something like that. So he wrote an article about this invention, about this problematic situation, and then publish it, and kids were supposed to generate an idea. For example, there is a big city in the desert, everything is fine, at night, and then all of a sudden the pipeline that delivers the water, to the city breaks. And so the water is out, the city is without water, hospitals, kindergartens, tragedy. And then every article of that kind ended with words, and suddenly the inventor appeared, and the kids were supposed to invent something, to suggest a solution. Altshuller said that the answers he got from kids from this newspaper, often they were much, much better and smarter than the real patent, which this story had been written. And so one day he took all these kind of stories, added some more stuff, and published it in as a book. And the book is called Very Strange Name. And suddenly the inventor appeared. And it is one of the greatest books, if you want to learn to kind of familiarize yourself with kids, with TRIZ, because it's a little bit of everything. And it is written in a very simple way. It was written for 12, 14-year-old kids. That's why adults read it easily. It's very entertaining. It has exercises. So yeah, I still think it's a wonderful book.
It's very clever. And like you say, it presents a story and then a riddle. And then suddenly the inventor appeared, and it really engages the curiosity. And they're hard. I mean, just reading through them.
But it's like a game. That's why kids loved it. They did not think it as some sophisticated, inventive problem solving. They took it as a game.
Yeah. What's your favorite of those? And maybe if you can share the resolution, if you remember one.
I do not remember resolution, but I remember some examples. The book is full with interesting examples, that in one research institute, that worked in agricultural area, they had a project, a research project to develop something, some pesticide, whatever, some remedy against some bugs, that used to devour crop of whatever, I don't remember what. And to develop this method how to fight those bugs, it was necessary to measure the temperature of bug's body. The bug is tiny. That is why looks like you cannot put a thermometer, under a bug's, paw, whatever. So it was necessary to design a special device. And then a technician, not a PhD, but a technician suggested, a very simple solution. And, people were supposed to, think about it. And of course, kids immediately came up with the idea, just to put many of these bugs into a glass, for example, and put the thermometer in, and you get an average temperature. It was really, really funny. Because once I was talking about this book at one workshop, a regular workshop, like for engineers, like we had at Action. And when I explained this problem, one guy says, yeah, I know the answer. I know. Okay. I thought, okay, good that he's so interested. I say, okay, so what is the answer? And he said, I need to take a glass, put like $100 into this glass to measure the temperature, and divided it by 100. I was ready.
So close.
Yeah. I didn't know what to say. I was kind of
wow, it's really cold in that glass.
It's really cold.
I wouldn't have thought it would have been that cold. It's colder than they're sucking energy out of the air. You know what I love about that approach, though? It's just like, a lot of us, we get in this innovation game, and everything seems so serious at times, and especially you work with high level people. And, a lot of us get into this because it's fun, because we started building things in the backyard and solving problems and making.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yes. But, with the brainstorming, they can get something really good, or they can get stupid. You never know.
Right.
But TRIZ, you have these tools, of course, the matrix, the inventive principles, that is the oldest one. But what is really the core is that Altshuller, when he was analyzing many patterns, as you can understand, he noticed that engineering systems of different kinds, they evolved somehow following the same steps, the same stepping stones.
Right.
And it was amazing because the products were very different, right? If someone asked you, what is in common between the toothbrush and a bed in which you sleep and a car? Nothing. It is, they are so different systems. But no, Altshuller noticed these common stepping stones, common steps, that engineering system pass, as they evolve. And he called it trends of engineering system evolution. There are not many trends. Some explain how the systems get more dynamic, acquire more degrees of freedom, how more controllable they become. So different trends focus on different aspects of evolution. For example, there is a trend of increasing dynamization. What Altshuller noticed in many systems. First, we have a system that is a monolith, solid monolith. Then it acquires a hinge. So it becomes more adaptable. Then it has many hinges. Then so many hinges that some parts become elastic. Then the system acquires liquid parts, gaseous parts, and fields. And these steps, practically every product that technology passes through it. Look at knife. You can cut with a solid blade. You can cut with with the fishing line, totally elastic. You can cut with water jet. You can cut with air jet. You can cut with a laser. Look at the beds in which we sleep. There is regular bed. You probably have heard about camp bed and a totally elastic hammock and of course water bed and inflatable bed. With the field that still, we didn't get it. But there are experiments that they run on frogs, small frogs and bugs that levitate in the field. So maybe in the future we'll be just levitating in the electromagnetic field when we sleep, right? As I said, toothbrushes, of course, you saw a regular one with hinges, folding ones, totally elastic. Again, don't get trapped with the name brush, not necessarily the function, remove plug, total elastic thing and chewing gum and this water pick. And now Philips has air pick and different electromagnetic thing, or ultrasonic field. So when you start analyzing evolution of cars, car with very few hinges, and then more and more hinges, convertibles, and BMW, the Gina line, the body of the car is totally elastic. It can different shape. You can change the shape of your car body.
Could you repeat, what are those major phases with the monolith? What are the major phases again that these things
Solid with a hinge, several hinges, so many hinges that some parts are elastic.
Okay.
And then liquid, liquid parts, right?
Yeah.
And then gas parts and field parts.
Yeah.
This is
and waves.
And then in the end, wait, I'm so fast because I'm now, okay, this is in my head only, but I'm thinking about like mobile phones at the moment.
Mobile phone.
I mean, we started out with the very thick one.
Yeah.
Now they're coming these folding things. So that
I remember Motorola one, there was one hinge or something.
Yeah.
Old one, and then more hinges, and then totally elastic ones. Yeah. And what about ball bearings? Bearings. We have regular bearings, and then we had water bearings or whatever. Then we have liquid bearings when we have air bearings, and we have electrical bearings.
And I guess for music players, it's also a similar story, right?
Right. That is what is fascinating. Actually, this is a part of TRIZ that is very practical and fascinating. Trend analysis. You take a product or a component and you actually, position it at different trends. And basically, you are prompted what the next steps should be. Not necessarily those. Sometimes the system jumps over. It really depends on market demand, because I can invent everything inflatable, but who will buy it, right? But that's why it is necessary to project the recommendations from trends on the market demand. If the movement along the trend satisfy one of the customer's needs, right, then it happens. If it doesn't, then the system doesn't go there. And this trend analysis is pretty interesting, maybe even for identifying hidden market needs. Because people never express the needs and no one asked them if they need it. But once you see what the next step of the trend suggests, and see what benefits it will give, you can ask the customer, and they say, "Wow, is it possible?" Yes, if you can do it, it is possible. Then it's another story. Then it's a task for engineers to do and kind of really embed it. Yeah.
Does it ever go the other way? Does it ever start going back with less hinges and to something more solid, or does it always progress?
Yeah, these trends are really very interesting because it's really the research showed that sometimes system goes along trend in that direction, sometimes it goes backwards. It happens at different situations. For example, there is a trend, this called trend of increasing coordination, that the tool and product get coordinated. And usually Altshuller himself really described this trend. It says, usually tool and product interact like that. First in a point, then along a line, more productive, more points. Then on a plane, many lines, and then 3D. Look at the washing machine. The first washing machine, what was that? Stone. They took, a piece of fabric, whatever, skin, went to water, and with a stone, they hit it, to remove dirt. So the contact of that washing machine wasn't a point. And then in German tribes thought about something better, a stick. There are many points, so they started slashing laundry with a stick. And then our grandmothers used the washboard, right? It was along a plane. And contemporary washing machine, it's all kind of 3D, right? So yeah, a tool becomes more productive going from point to line to 2D to 3D. And then, it became, just when we applied it to project, we saw that sometimes, for some reason, the evolution goes backwards from plane to line, from line to point. What's going on? And then we looked, at that. We noticed, yeah, everything depends on the situation. If this action, is useful, and if there are resources, of course, let us go from point to line to 2D, 3D. You go fishing, just one fishing pole, you can catch one fish. Line fishing, you have
Right.
you have many fishing, many hooks. And if you use a net, you can put it across the river and catch everything. And trolling, when you scoop like a part of the ocean, it's even more productive. Right?
And there's also a way, if they use electromagnetic fields, they use it when they're going to take samples of fish. They have these big electrodes and they shock them and they just float up in the water. That's it would be illegal to do that and harvest them, but governments do that to when they want to measure how many. So there's your fields.
They can do it, but if you don't have resources, it's a useful function. You don't have resources. I go hunting for a bear. I cannot withstand the bear, right? So that is why if I just try to kind of wrestle with the bear or hit it on the head with a sheet of metal, it will not work. The only chance I will have if I kind of muster all my strength and focus it in one point. Mm-hmm. That is why using a spear would be the most efficient thing. So I go to the very point because I need to concentrate all the power I have in one point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What occurs to me, this I don't think this is any great insight, but I'm just sort of absorbing this as I'm thinking about trees. It seems it's really about patterns that emerge, that just exist, almost like laws of the universe. And if you understand these patterns of innovation, what's common to this and this one, the various different ones, then you can use those patterns as inspiration for how to change something else.
Yeah.
Is that a way to think of it?
Generalized roadmaps. Absolutely. Absolutely. Sometimes when I see some new product, that's another kind of I would not say bad thing, but that's what TRIZ gave me. When I go through stores looking at new products, sometimes I see something, great, how interesting. And then my inner voice tells me, why you're surprised? That's according to this and this trend.
Right.
It should have happened. So what is that excitement about? Yeah.
Right.
And another thing, if the action is harmful, but there is a little bit of it. If it is harmful and a little bit, then probably it makes sense to dilute it. In that case, I will go from point to 3D, right? For example, if, I have to jump, I live on the 10th floor. If I have jumped from the 10th floor, probably my landing on the ground will not be very happy. Right, because kinetic energy with which I hit, the ground would be pretty high. I will be smashed. So, but if I dilute it, I will jump on a firefighter's net. That my kinetic energy, because kinetic energy is limited. We can calculate it. It depends on my weight. It depends on the distance, on the height, right? MGH, right? If I dilute it even more, 3D, for example, there is like stuntsmen bag. So it's like semi-inflated bag into which you big kind of bag into which you jump. Then the kinetic energy is distributed 3D, right? So there are situations where, so there are situations when the trend goes, the evolution goes that way, and there are situations when the evolution goes this way, and that's what TRIZ has. That's why these things are much more kind of much bigger than contradiction matrix.
Well, I was just going to ask you about that, because that's one of the, when most people that have just a little bit of knowledge, maybe they read a Wikipedia article, that's sort of their short version. Oh, it's the contradictions, which is quite interesting. Could you tell us
but it's very small.
It's a little bit of it. I know it's just a little bit of it, but could you tell us what are these? What is the contradiction matrix, and how is that useful?
Well, it's easy because, as I say, it's a matrix, right? A vertical axis, it's a list of parameters that I want to improve. The horizontal, it is a list of parameters that might deteriorate. So you take your situation, right? Remember, I told you this engineer's got a problem. I need to make the system strong.
Yep.
And for that is designing it thick. Okay, I made it. It's strong. Exactly like my professor had taught me.
Right.
But it's too heavy. So what happened? I improved strength as my professor taught me, but there is another parameter, weight, that deteriorated. I put strength in the vertical axis, weight in the horizontal axis, and the crossing of this line in the column will give me 4 or 3 inventive principles that say, for example, use another state of aggregate. Another state of aggregate. So right now I'm doing everything of solid. Another state of aggregate, it will be a liquid, and it can be air or gas. Oh, interesting. What if it is, for example, a flexible beam with very, very high pressure inside? It will be strong like hell, but it will not be heavy, right? Or, so these inventive principles around which I brainstorm, they are like pointers, directions into which we need to think.
Can I just, so that I understand this correctly, I find this extremely interesting. So kind of you put these two variables, you cross them, and then you see where you see the contradiction. And then what TRIZ does, if I understand this correct, is give you like 4 or 5 almost like clues. Try this, try that, try the other thing, in order to resolve or to get rid of the contradiction.
That's right. But it does not give you ready solutions, right? Because as someone else might interpret it differently. Not like inflatable beam, but something, some other solutions, right?
Yeah, but it's exactly so. Try to change the aggregate state.
That's right.
So more a general.
For example, if I make the table very thick, it will be strong. I can dance on it, but it will be too heavy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can make it elastic and inflated with compressed air, so it will be strong enough. But use air can lead to some other solution. What if I take balloons with light gas in my hands when I want to dance on the table, and these balloons would compensate for my weight, and I can dance on the table without changing its weight?
Okay.
You see, that's a totally different solution. But so that's why, for example, use gaseous substance instead of solid can lead to very different solutions. That is why some people say, no, that's not a theory. Because theory it is when several engineers have the same problem and they get to the same solution. Here, we don't have that. All these engineers can come with different solutions, but all the engineers will get with the same solution model. They just interpret it, this model of the solution differently, right? Because it's pretty broad. So actually, TRIZ, or the last thing, TRIZ works with models. because TRIZ has ways how to take a problem and model it in a specific way. And then TRIZ tools like the matrix, it converts model of the problem into model of the solution. That's it. TRIZ does not give you a ready solution. So it works only with models of problems, model of solutions. That's why when people learn it, they need to learn how to model problems correctly and how to, interpret models of solution correctly.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I mean, probably the problem that an engineer faces is in a certain sense concrete and unique. It probably never is the same but there is. So what then is, how do I know what problem I'm facing? I think that's a
10
5-hour.
Yeah,
because it's a long call today.
Yeah, that's a problem because Einstein, yes, you probably heard that phrase. He used to say that if he had 1 hour to solve a problem on which his life depended, 1 hour, 60 minutes, he would spend 45 minutes analyzing the problem, 10 minutes reviewing the problem, and 5 minutes solving it. So it is much more important to select the right problem. Because once you selected it, solving is easy. Why? Because engineers, I will tell you a big secret. Engineers are not married to problems. Engineers don't have to solve problems. They need to achieve the project goal. That's it. And the project goal can be achieved by solving very different problems. Some of them are difficult, some of them are easy. That's why what we need to do, we need to find the easiest problem through which we can achieve the project goal. That's why some companies fail, some companies are very productive. They have the same goal, but they try to achieve it through solving different problems. One company takes very difficult way, another company very simple way. That is why modern TRIZ has a big analytical part and spends more time on kind of selecting that easy problem through which the goal can be achieved than really solving.
So is a problem one of these trade-offs in TRIZ? Well, is it one of these?
No, TRIZ is not doing trade-offs. It's not like Six Sigma. TRIZ resolves contradictions.
But yeah, so is a problem a contradiction, or are there many kinds of different?
There are several. There are 4 ways how we can model these problems. But before that, we need to find it. There are very powerful analytical tools how to find the right problem to solve. The easiest one. And also there are tools to substitute. Basically, it's the same thing, to substitute the difficult problem with a totally new one. No one has ever stated it. That's why, we have a white field in front of us. But if we solve it, we will achieve the project goal. One of the tools from that problem identification toolkit, it is called trimming. Maybe you do it subconsciously, maybe not. But basically, if there is a component in your system that is not good and you want to improve it and you try different ways how to improve it, trimming says, no, if this component is so nasty, don't bother, throw it away. How can I throw it away? It is designed for a reason. It performs these useful functions. Trimming says, fine, identify the useful function this component should to perform, throw it out, should perform, throw it out, and teach the remaining parts to perform these functions.
I remember this concept of trimming.
Yeah.
I really love it.
And no one ever thinks about it.
Yeah.
You know what happens? General Electric, they deploy TRIZ. Out of 5,000 R&D people worldwide, they trained 3,000 people. That was like 5 years of my life. 5,000 people, R&D, scientists and engineers. But when first they had found TRIZ long ago, and they found it with the contradiction matrix. But when they tried contradiction matrix, any kind of inventive principles that they got, they said we had tried it already. We have been in this area for a century. We tried everything that inventive principle suggested. That is why they said, well, TRIZ maybe it's just for beginners, for young engineers, but it is not for savvy professionals in our R&D. But this analytical part, and for example, trimming, suggests totally different. They were struggling with their like combustion chamber and their aircraft engine. There were some parts, and they tried to improve them, doing this and this and this. And we say, what? This part, it breaks, it is not working well, throw it out. But prior to that, we need to do a very detailed so-called function analysis to know exactly what useful functions every component performs. And then I take this bad part, throw it out. And now I have totally new problems that talented GE engineers never really addressed. How to enable some other components to perform functions for which they had not been designed. You see, totally different problem. They had to modify other components, to enable them to perform the functions of the component that had been trimmed. So they never had addressed this problem before. That's why they were fascinated. Yeah. And when they applied contradiction matrix to these problems, they got some ideas they had never been having before, because they had never addressed that problem before.
This idea of functional analysis, to me, is one of the most interesting parts of TRIZ for several reasons. But for folks who may not have heard of it, what is functional analysis? What is it? Can you hear me?
Probably can guess. Because no, because I said that we need to analyze every component to determine functions of every component of your system. Right. In case you want to trim a component. That's why, the analytical part includes basically you take the system you want to improve, you split it into components, and going through a special procedure, you determine, functions every component performs, how well, useful functions, harmful functions. It doesn't create anything new. You just arrange the knowledge of your system in a specific way. And then if you decide to trim a component, you know exactly, because it performs some harmful functions, it does not do the functions well. You trim it and you delegate, what functions you need to preserve, and delegate to other components.
So, if you're listening on the podcast, you can't see what I'm doing, but I'm holding my coffee cup. And so if I said, well, my cup's too expensive, and so maybe I'm going to remove this handle. Just cut it off. So then what's the function of the handle? Well, it was to support the cup. Well, I can still, so then some other aspect or feature, attribute of the cup must serve to hold it.
The cup can have this shape, with the waist in the middle. Right. So it will be easier to hold it there, because up and down it is bigger in diameter than the center.
One reason I think this is a super powerful concept is, over time, products, if you're an engineer and you're told, hey, don't make this thing where it doesn't break, the easiest way to do that is just add more metal to it, make it bigger, stronger. We'll do that for a few generations of products. And now the product you're working on, somebody else, they added that steel to it, 10 years ago. And you've got this product and you don't know, there's this waste that has been built into it. And you're you don't know what you can take out. And so this idea of trimming, I absolutely love, where you say, well, what's the function of this? What if we just trim? What if let's cut it out? Let's just cut it out and see what happens.
Right.
Yeah.
I I think maybe I have it or maybe not. I do not remember. No, I don't have it. Oh, but I have different thing. For example, refrigerator, or whatever, a car.
Yeah.
Can you tell me what component of your car is the best and what component of your car is the worst?
I think the steering wheel is pretty important.
So, but what is better? Okay, steering wheels, are they more important than the engine?
Yeah, I would say the engine. I would have said the engine.
Yeah, good
What
one.
is better? So what is better? What is the best component? And people say, this is a stupid question. I can compare two engines. I can compare two wheels, but I cannot compare engine and the wheel. It's comparing apples and oranges.
Yeah.
Function analysis allow us to do that because function analysis has a criterion, called value. That is a ratio of functionality important, how important the component is divided by cost.
Yes.
And there is a way how to basically calculate the functionality important. So basically, I split my system into components. I calculate functionality importance of every component. I get information from the accounting about cost, and I put all these components on this chart: functionality importance, and horizontal is cost. And then look, of course, actually we can judge if there are many points around this line. It means the system is designed well, because the more important the component is, the more expensive it is. It's fair. But if the points are all over the place, that's a bad design. But what I can do more, I can split these things into 4 quadrants. And I have different improvement strategies for different components of my system. This is my target domain. Cheap components and very important. I love them. These components, they are not expensive, but they are kind of underloaded. They're not important. So we need to improve this functionality there. These components, they do a good job, important functions, but they are expensive like hell. For that, I need to do cost reduction. And these components here, lower right-hand corner, they're expensive and they are not important. What do we do with them? What do we do with people who have a lot of salaries, high salary, and do not work well? Trimming. So you see, I did function analysis of my product, and I know innovation strategies for different parts. Not one strategy, one size fits all, but I have different innovation approaches for different parts. And each of these is supported by TRIZ with tools. For each strategy, for each group of components, TRIZ offers tools.
So this that I understand this correctly. Could we say, for example, you take the car, and then the function of the engine is, I don't know, kind of to make it move forward,
right,
or to
enable
it to move.
Yeah. It might be that engine actually has lower value than some other component because it is important, but it is very expensive.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? And I have another comment on this formula. I think people in value engineering also use this relationship of value is the ratio of function over cost. But I always wondered, but then, okay, so I could just, if I add tons and tons of functions that are infinitely expensive, then it would not change the value of my product. It's maybe a bit too detailed, but I always kind of wondered.
The functions, again, we can add a lot of functions, but usually, functions should be, the customer should need that, right? I can design a copying machine that also polishes shoes and makes coffee, but the customers that do not need it. They are not going to pay for these functions. Right. So the functions, again, that is another thing, how we improve. It needs, one of the important inputs, it is the market voice of the customer, right? Because function analysis just gives me the trends, for example, they give me the one-sided view from the perspective of system evolution. But I need to have another perspective, what the market wants. Because I can tell you everything should be inflatable. There will be inflatable table, there will be inflatable chair, everything will be inflatable. Will you start a startup with me that makes inflatable tables? Probably not, because we will go bankrupt, right? Because no one will do it. But you see, this function analysis, it's only one part, the first analytical part. After that, to make a decision what component to trim, it is not only function analysis contributes, but there is a tool that pretty well, 5 whys, right? Or RC, root cause analysis, or cause effect chain analysis, because it might be that really the problem starts with something that has very low value. For example, I build houses and they collapse. One, second, third, they collapse. So I start doing cause effect chain analysis, root cause analysis. The house collapses. Why? The walls collapsed inside. Why? Because the beam between the walls broke. Why? Because there was a joint in the middle of that beam that broke. Why? Because the bolts, in that joint broke. Why? They got rusty. You see, function analysis will never recommend that bolts be trimmed. Bolts have very high value. Their cost is next to zero. That is why the bolts will never be suggested for trimming, but from cause effect analysis perspective, we will get to them.
But I do feel you're saying this dimension of the market, it also goes into this value consideration, because
not here.
I still don't see how, if you you could add an infinite number of infinitely costly features and the value is never negative, it's just zero, it doesn't change anything. So
no, value, it is just for comparison. It is not absolute thing. It for comparison different parts, different components of the system. And again, when we improve the system, we do not just arbitrarily add a bunch of expensive functions, taking them out of the blue, right? So that is why, voice of the customer, and another thing, that is related to TRIZ, Scott knows that, it is not only what the customer asks for, but it is also what the customer is ready to pay, because the customer will ask 1,000 things, but when it comes to paying, they will not pay. That is why we need to add functions. We need to add the features only if we're sure that the customer will pay for that. If they pay for that, okay, let it be expensive. They are ready to pay for that. Or we will work on reducing cost. It will come to that. But basically, this thing with the voice of the customer, or identifying part of the voice of the customer for which the customer is ready to pay, it goes before TRIZ. It goes just to understand what projects we need to start. If we identify that there is the need that the customer is ready to pay, there is known needs, and there are hidden needs, right? The customer never requested. Yeah. So that thing, it goes before TRIZ. Once we decided what projects to have, what needs, what features we are ready to add to the product, because we know exactly that the customer is ready to pay, then we start improving with this function analysis and all that thing.
And I also had another question. Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, another question relating to, in your experience, is it always possible to relate a function to a single component? Because when I've done similar kinds of exercises, I've often found that you could say that, this famous phrase that the total is more than the sum of the parts, this famous sentence. So it's often difficult to relate a function to a specific component I found. I wondered what your experience was with that.
Well, it really depends what you call functions. In function analysis that is working with TRIZ, part of TRIZ methodology, function is very, very specific thing. By function, we mean an action that one component performs on another that changes parameter of that second component. Because if I want to improve the function, I need to know what parameter I need to improve. Because depending on that, I will be looking for a technology that is designed to change that parameter. You see? So, and in this case, the formulation of function is very clear. There is the carrier, there is object of the function, and I need to understand what parameter of the object of the function the carrier changes or maintains. Right? For example, the cup holds coffee. Right? Okay, you want to improve it because it's leaking or something. Okay, I will find different technologies that allow to hold better. Because in TRIZ, there are several, as I mentioned, several problem-solving tools. Contradiction matrix is one, but there is also a tool called function-oriented search. When we formulate the problem as a function, and there is a way how to look for technologies that perform this function in different fields of engineering. Yeah. For example, and that is why in function analysis, some function formulations are wrong. We use them in our everyday life, but they are wrong. For example, dryer. Dryer dries shirts. Wrong. What parameter of the shirt does the dryer change? None. So the dryer removes liquid. You see, it removes liquid from here away. It changes coordinates of liquid. Or evaporates liquid. Because if I want to improve that, I will be looking for technologies how to move liquid. And there are technologies, for example, in medicine when they move blood, but no one calls it drying. In the oil industry where they move oil, no one calls it drying. But if we say, I need to improve drying and put it into Google, we'll limit ourselves only to drying. But technologies that can solve our problems can come from many more areas. Does it make sense?
Yeah. You mean reframing it into removing liquid instead of drying? It
opens totally new horizons.
Okay. Yeah.
I feel like because a lot of these
moving blood, it has a technology about moving liquid, but no person in the world calls it drying.
Right.
I feel like a lot of these different kind of techniques and tools that you're explaining there are these reframing or methods to reframe the problem, to think in a different way to think about a different problem than in the end.
Exactly. Totally correct, Jan, because in TRIZ, the idea is to take another problem to solving. If there's a problem that people already try to solve, it's hard, it's difficult, and we should not be presumptuous. We are much cleverer. That's why our goal is to find another problem that is easier to solve, but through that other problem, you can achieve the project goal. Mm. That is exactly, you just put the nail on the head.
You get an A, Jan.
I don't have an engineering background, so this makes me especially proud.
Yeah. That is why you see TRIZ is really much bigger, because what it did, like Six Sigma, it started sucking in function analysis and cause-effect chain and more. And in the beginning, it was just different names, that it had, so that was TRIZ, and that one, I don't know how to do that, how to move. Okay, I don't know if
this is, by the way, a good moment to say you should check out our YouTube channel, because Sergei is showing us slides. So
that's right.
It is not good. That's okay. So there's different stages. TRIZ was called differently, like innovative technology of design, TRIZ plus, and so on. But in the long run, everything boiled down to TRIZ.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But can we? I mean, so there's all of these different trends and techniques and methods and tools and so on. But is there like a sequential kind of steps that you need to follow in order to do this, or is it?
Exactly. There is roadmap, and that's, yeah, exactly. And that's what, because right now there are a lot of consultants, companies, individual consultants that just do consulting. They do not call it TRIZ consulting because, to tell the truth, the name of TRIZ, it scares people away. Theory, the first scare, of inventive problem solving, the second scare. Companies are afraid of it. They say, we don't need inventions. We just need to solve engineering problems. We do not, aspire to these heights. Maybe you should go talk to MIT professors about that. Right. That is why there are much kind of quieter names: systematic innovation, pragmatic. I mean, there are hundreds of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is definitely something to that, to communicating an idea, to make it, for somebody who's not intimidated by it and is even interested. I have to ask this because I may never get another chance to learn it again. I know it's an acronym it's actually from a Russian phrase. I'll probably never remember, but what is the Russian name for it, that from which the acronym sort of cobbled together?
In the beginning, it was an attraction, exotic or something like that.
Yeah.
But after that, the name of TRIZ starting, we have grown up of those, short pants.
But what is it in Russian? What's the name, Russian name for it?
Теория решения изобретательских задач. TRIZ. Теория, it's theory.
How are you?
Yeah.
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 Right. But there are a lot of different applications also. You see this logo, designed for patentability, because it turned out that a number of TRIZ tools are very good for example, if you use some tools in a certain sequence and with certain twist, solutions that you will get in the end are automatically satisfying criteria of patentability. So it is not that you develop something and then you check, maybe I was lucky and it can be patented. No, here, you get a novel solution that satisfies your specs, and if you want it, you can patent it. There are ways how to walk around competitive patent. I take a patent. You see, the claim tells me what components there are and what they do, the description of the patent. I can build function model of the patent. I can trim some components and find trimming solutions, and those solutions will not have some components that the patent had. That's why I have freedom to operate. And I change some remaining components, enabling them to perform the functions that, I delegated to them from the trim component, and those can be patented. And it is basically doing it step-by-step procedure.
If I could just repeat that, so you find a very novel solution, perhaps something patented, do a functional analysis. What's the function of each component? And then if you can trim some, in other words, remove some, delegate those functions to other, perhaps substitute attributes that perform the same function, you could essentially accomplish the same goal with a product that's somewhat different, at least from an IP perspective, different enough.
And developing like dependent claims, kind of expanding more and more. Think about trends. Using trends, you can develop hundreds of dependent claims, how the system will improve step by step.
Who would you say that TRIZ is best suited for? Who are the folks that get the most value out of it? It could be a broad group, but just what are the top groups that come to mind?
Because sometimes people say, oh, it's applicable for everything. And it's this answer is a kiss of death. Because if you are selling a medicine and they ask you, for what is it? And you say, everything. So first of all, we are talking about engineering systems. There are attempts to use it for TRIZ in business, but it's still starting. But of course, automotive industry, aircraft, machine building, all these kind of hardcore engineering areas, they're absolutely for TRIZ. Where TRIZ does not work, I would say, but again, for some projects, it is pharma. because of course pharma, there is also machinery and there are processes and TRIZ can be used there, but big part of pharma is based on experimentation. And many patents, many developments, they are based on just research, just statistical. Yeah. They did a lot of tests and they figured out the most optimal concentrations and so on. They cannot really explain it. It's like a black box.
A lot of trial and error. Let's see what this product does. Let's see what
that
this
is why you cannot do that. Another area, according to my experience, where it did not work well, does not work well, it is how to say that? It's not system. It is when a company just an integrator. They buy all the ingredients and just assemble these things. We still can improve technological process of assembly because that's what the company owns, but the company cannot interfere with those components. They just buy them. That is why TRIZ has quite a limitation here. Right, it really cannot use the real power of TRIZ.
They might improve the machine that mixes the things together, but not the...
That's right. But even now, those companies that do integration, they also do not make the machines.
Usually not.
They just buy everything and just use the manpower. That's it.
Okay. I'll tell you a real example that they didn't use TRIZ per se, but essentially used a lot of this functional analysis principle. It was a tractor industry project, and in this case they needed to get to a lower price point. There was this huge market, this lower price point, but there were all these rules the engineers had. It has to be this strong, it has to be made of this, it has to have this feature, it has to have that. And so they essentially just started trimming. It's like, this thing it has to have, let's go, let's just start getting rid of things and then essentially go back to customers and see. It's really seeing, did the customers value the function of it, right? And all these rules that were built up over years and years and years, the customers had changed since the decades before, but a lot of the features were still there. Yeah. And they were able to get rid of lots of cost and come in and it was one of the most interesting innovations I've ever seen, because it did not go up market. It didn't do anything better. It just got rid of a lot of functionality, and it did some basic things much more cheaply, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, once long ago, but still I will not make this. It's one of the largest consumer companies, in the United States. We did analysis of tooth cream making process. It's toothpaste, but for some reason they call it tooth cream. I do not know why. And there is a way how to do function analysis of technological processes. So we did that. And there were 170 something functions, because there are a number of operations, a lot of different machinery. And actually these functions can be ranked. There are functions for processes like productive. It means results of that function can be seen in the final product. They making irreversible changes, so they are really important. And there are providing functions that just help to perform other, and corrective. Yeah. So out of those 170 something functions, there were only 6 productive functions. Mm-hmm. Why it happened? Because this process, it was 50 years old. There were different customers. They were adding different things to satisfy this customer, this. And in the long run, it was a monster. Mm. And why they decided to do that? They were building a new factory. And someone at that company had an idea, maybe we should not repeat, everything, what we had. And when they saw like 6 productive functions out of 170 something, definitely it was necessary to redesign the process completely, not improve, not.
Yeah. That's, because engineers, a lot of times, whatever's been built into it, it's like, if I'm an engineer working on this project, it's a lot of risk to me to say, we should move this and that. It's why take that career risk, guys? We just keep building, we just keep adding on. Well, let me ask you a question. Yeah. So if somebody wanted to learn TRIZ, where would you recommend them starting? Books to read, or what?
Books to read. You already know, suddenly the inventor appeared, but also there are already books. Okay, I did not plan it. It is just when I do training online. Yeah. They're here.
Well, tell us. Yeah.
Yeah, there is a book, for example, this one, it is, I don't know if you can see it, probably not. Yeah, it is called State of the Art TRIZ, Theory of Inventive Problem Solving. Maybe you know there is International TRIZ Association, maybe Scott knows. Altshuller was its president till he passed away, and he chartered this organization to continue TRIZ deployment. So this book is basically officially approved, by this. Yeah. So this one, if you are interested in a specific application, this is already kind of, this is the design for patentability. I don't know if you can see it. I cannot. Don't.
So we can't. So it's designed for patentability.
For patentability, right. So this is focusing on specific. There are some books. There are some other books that are not necessarily approved by this TRIZ association, but are pretty good. Right. Which one? There is one book like Innovation on Demand, I think, by Victor Fay. There is a author, Victor Fay.
That's a good title.
It is. It really is.
Yeah.
What was the first one you showed? The first one you said?
It is called State of the Art TRIZ. Theory of the Art. Yeah, State of the Art TRIZ, Theory for Inventive Problem Solving.
Excellent.
That. So we approved it. We use it at different universities. You see, at universities there are courses. I was teaching it at Tufts, but they do not call it TRIZ. It is too exotic. That's why in university it is systematic innovation, or at Tufts it was TRIZ-based systematic innovation. So something like that, because that's when the name of TRIZ basically put such a frame around it that it doesn't allow to expand. When people hear TRIZ, they think this is too narrow.
The funny thing about that is it has such an amazing history with Altshuller and just his adventures. To me, that would make it all the more reason to tell that story. I mean, it's almost I'm sure. I mean, I can't imagine the hardships involved with it, but it's an amazing story.
That's right. But to tell the truth, it seemed much more exotic like 30 years ago.
Sure.
When I came to the United States at that time, that was really. But again, like when I came to the United States, I came to Tennessee, Oak Ridge, just an exchange. Yeah, there probably people did not see many people from Russia.
Right.
They were asking, they were very friendly, very interested, but they were asking questions. Is it true that there are polar bears roaming around the city? So for them, like everything about the Soviet Union was fascinating. Was
sure.
Now this thing kind of went down.
I used to live in Knoxville, so I was right there near you.
Oh, really? Yeah.
It's a beautiful area.
Yeah. I also lived in Knoxville because I was working at UT.
Oh, wow. Excellent.
Yeah.
It is a beautiful area.
That was my first American experience. That is very nice. I really liked it. The only regret I have not sucked in the Southern drawl. I really liked it, but I, just was there for a couple of years, so I didn't have enough time.
Well, I can help you out with the Southern drawl. That's my specialty.
Really?
That's one of my three talents. I'm working on figuring out what the other two are. Yeah.
I love it.
I'm not accused of being from New York City. It's funny. So Jonathan and Jan you're from Europe. You're from Soviet Union. Most folks in Europe, they think I'm from Texas. That's where, I don't know, but I guess from television or something.
No. In Texas, some people, they chew on words, they mumble. It is sometimes difficult to understand. I would have never thought that you were from Texas.
You've been here a long time now, though. You've been here a long time now. Well, just before we wrap up, there's just one thing I'm just really dying to know, and this will sort of bring it full circle back to our talking about Altshuller earlier. One of the most fascinating things is that you were a student of this fascinating person. What was he like as a teacher? And then we'll sort of wrap it up.
Well, not only me. There are some people that studied from Altshuller.
Not that I know.
Who live in the United States. Not very many, but there are people who kind of lived in the same city with him, like Victor Fay, and a little bit older people, because they spent, at that time, I was and I was just a boy. I was one of them, very, very young. Yeah. He was, first of all, he was fascinating person. He was fascinating presenter. You could listen to him just with your mouth open and just like mesmerized. Mm-hmm. His classes were absolutely fantastic. He was running around, he was jumping, he was very emotional. He was teaching. Wow. I tried to imitate it later, but he was unsurpassable. Also, probably because he was a science fiction writer, the way he expressed himself, it also, you could tell that he can write, that he can speak. He was, it's interesting. He was, if you did not know person at all, he was extremely kind of polite. When he got to know you, well, he was not kind of rude, but he could be basically kind of more, I would say, direct. Let us put it this way. So, but at the same time, if he kind of can be more abrupt with you, you would look at it as an indicator that he thinks that you are closer to him, so he can allow himself, answer this way.
It's a sign of respect. He respected your intellect enough, and he cared enough about your, if I can sort of visualize a little bit, he cared enough about your understanding that he wouldn't just let it go. He'd correct you to make sure you got it right. Is that
right? Right. But for me, he was still kind of like a god. There were people older, who spent more time with him, but still they were very, very, I would say, they looked at him also as someone, not equal to them. He was really like a guru. That's what when they call it in India. I understand it. Yeah, he was a teacher.
Yeah. And again, that's what his name literally means. Is it? I don't speak German. Isn't Altshuller? Does that mean teacher?
Old student.
Old student. Oh, okay. Old student. Okay, that was off. That's what I get for trying that. Yeah. Well, excellent. Well, we'll turn this to a close. Sergei, fascinating conversation. Anything else about TRIZ that you sort of like to let everybody know that we haven't covered? We pretty much got it all nailed down.
All right. Good. Yeah. Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Wonderful. It was absolutely fantastic. One of the things I learned is it's not a good idea to send open letters to communist dictators, in case there's any doubt about that. If anybody's thinking of doing that, just don't do it. Don't do it. That didn't work out. Okay. And that, friends, concludes today's Product Quest podcast. Please send any comments or ideas for future shows to productquestpodcast@gmail.com, and we'll see you next time.
Easy to teach TRIZ. You know why? But every single time, I do it, I get excited myself.